30 years ago, the nation took a weekly journey back in time to the Edwardian era, a time when toffs were toffs and servants knew their place. 165 Eaton Place was home to the Uppies and the Downies, the Bellamys and their devoted servants, in the greatest costume drama of all.
Everyone say cheese, everyone say Mrs. Bridges, Mrs. Bridges.
Tonight, we open the parlour door on the characters who brought Britain to a standstill every Sunday evening. Home James and don't spare the horses. It's time once more for Upstairs Downstairs.
That's it. That'll be her ladyship. Come on, upstairs, all of us, quickly.
Oh, damn.
Oh, Ruby, what have you broken now?
Luncheon is served.
Thank you, Hudson. The great thing about Upstairs Downstairs was you got 2 plays for the price of 1. You had the upstairs, you had all the pretty costumes and the wonderful and the upper class behaviour, which was fascinating to watch.
Your taxi is here, sir.
Ah, thank you, Hudson. Along, Georgina. Let us step into our hackney cab and take Ranelagh by storm.
But you also had the downstairs.
Ruby.
I think it was a real breakthrough to suddenly see this extraordinary other life, what happened the other side of the green baize door. You could see what the butler was like when he wasn't in front of the family. You could see the kind of tensions and relationships that went on around the kitchen table and in the scullery.
Mr. Hudson, I've got to talk to you.
Knock before you come into my pantry, Daisy.
All the characters are good. They interwove very cleverly. And I suppose it was a sort of hankering back to the good old days.
Oh, Ruby. Nursery tray ready, Mrs. Bridges?
No, it is not, Rose. You'll have to get it yourself. I shouldn't have...
The idea of a drama based on life above and below stairs in Edwardian London was cooked up by 2 actor friends, Eileen Atkins and Jean Marsh. Their parents had been in service, so there were no strangers to tales of scullery intrigue and pantry politics.
We started to develop this idea about servants, and we were just going to have it downstairs, but of course it's crazy because the servants have to serve somebody, so it became downstairs, upstairs, and then, you know, upstairs, downstairs, and that was it, basing it on things we knew.
It was first served up on Sunday, the 10th of October, 1971, and became an overnight sensation.
Within 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, it was certainly in the top 10, and it went to number 1. And it was the first time ever that a television series had been liked by the critics and the public.
I've ordered some champagne to send us on our way. Bring it up, will you, Frederick?
Very good, sir.
It was the start of our love affair with the series that was to last for 5 years.
That'll be a ladyship at last.
Soon, regular audiences of 15 million were commonplace, and people would move heaven and earth, literally, to make sure they caught it.
Someone sent us in a photograph of a parish church notice board when the vicar had suggested he'd move Evensong earlier so people could get back.
Well, the series was so popular that one day they changed it to a Saturday evening and it opposed Match of the Day. Households throughout Britain were deciding which they were going to watch, whether it was going to be Upstairs, Downstairs or Match of the Day. And it was an incredible talking point.
The Bellamys became a British institution, inspiring a generation of comedians.
Your mistress wants a word with you.
What, you mean she's here in the house now?
Lady Bellamy.
Oh, I see, I'm awfully sorry, yes.
Hudson, I specifically asked Mrs. Bridges for fairy cakes, and what have you brought? This is rock, Hudson.
I knew a bloke once from South America. He was a Brazilian.
How interesting. I believe they're very well known for their nuts.
Oh, they certainly are.
Les fruits de mer.
What?
Fruits of the sea.
Whatever's that?
Oh, scallops to you. You and all, Mrs. Bridges.
A woman wrote and said, I simply love your show. A wonderful show. And it was such a marvellous title for it, Upstairs, Downstairs. Because, of course, my husband and I watch it upstairs on the colour set, and all the servants watch it downstairs in black and white. And we thought, oh, nothing's changed, you know.
Jean Marsh found herself following in her mother's footsteps in a way she'd never intended.
Your tea, Melody.
Thank you, Rose. Rose was the head house parlourmaid. Very, very good at her job, she was. Very good scrubber, cleaner, could help Mrs. Bridges with the cooking. And never forget, she was the head. All the other housemaids were under her thumb.
Corsets, top drawer, left-hand side. Corset laces, top drawer, right-hand side. Camisole, second drawer, left-hand side. Drawers, second drawer, right-hand side. All petticoats laid out neatly in a third drawer down. And all stockings put in the silk bag next to them.
My mother was so cross when I took the part of Rose. She said, why don't you play the lady? I mean, wouldn't that be nicer? You must have a choice as it's your and Eileen's idea. And I said, but I would rather play Rose. It's a better part, I think.
And in the parlour pecking order, Rose was rungs above poor sweet Ruby. She wasn't the sharpest knife in the box. In fact, she didn't even know where the knife box was.
Mix flour and add an ounce of butter and rub well.
Oh, it's butter. Oh, I am daft. I thought it said bitter. So I poured in a jug of ale. I'll have to start again, won't I?
You certainly will, Ruby.
I always feel Ruby was a bit like the clown on the banana skin who kept falling down. She tried so hard to walk properly and...
Ruby!
Yes, Mrs. Bridges?
A cup for Mr. Hudson, or I'll have your scalp.
When Ruby slipped up, Mrs. Bridges was there to catch her. They became the nation's favourite comedy duo, and Ruby was their catchphrase.
Ruby, 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 Ruby!
Oh. Mrs. Bridges had this thing, if anything went wrong, she'd look at me, go, Ruby!
Ruby?
People would tell her what to do, and Ruby would do it. She wouldn't think for herself. I mean, Mrs. Bridges would say, come on, Ruby, chop the parsley.
Work at it, girl. Elbow grease.
Yes, Mrs. Bridges.
So Ruby would chop the parsley. She wouldn't dream of washing it because she hadn't been told to.
I suppose you washed it first.
You didn't tell me to, Mrs. Bridges.
I don't know. There's something wrong with that poor girl.
I remember one day, one episode where she just looked at Ruby and said, Ruby, I've never met a more stupid girl than you.
One day you'll fall and break your neck, and good riddance.
I mean, poor Ruby, she was absolutely mortified. I mean, what a thing to say.
But not all the below-stairs girls were as downtrodden as Ruby. There was the odd scargill amongst the saucepans.
I played Daisy, who's the under-house parlour maid from Dalston, Mr. Hudson.
Well, I've got beds to make, meals to serve, the old house to keep clean, all the linen, and now the bloody silver to unwrap. I need my head looking at staying in this house, I really do.
Well, I was pretty left-wing at that time, and yes, it did rankle a bit, the sort of, standing still with your hands behind your back, being perfect, having perfect manners.
I just hope those beds get made sometime this morning, Mr. Hudson, because I am not making them by myself.
She became quite a feisty little miss.
Like all pampered Edwardian aristos, the Bellamys had a squad of servants on hand, or on foot in the case of the trusty footman.
I mean, you cleaned, you polished, you emptied various things from, what should we say, chamber pots, I should think. You were a servant, bottom line, that's what you were.
Hello, Fred. That for me?
Soda, miss, say when?
No, don't. You'll splash the walls.
Incidentally, my mother and my aunt were in service, so I got a bit of information from both of them. They were in service in Chelsea. My mother always tells me she's done enough washing up to last her a lifetime.
While it was down to the servants to keep the house shipshape, upstairs the household were leading the life of Riley.
Ruby, what on earth are you doing in here?
I'm sorry, sir. Daisy's got...
Take this tray down, it's been waiting an hour.
Yes.
James Bellamy was brusque and terribly British, something that came easily to Simon Williams. He was schooled in the art of maintaining a stiff upper lip.
Having been to an English public school, there used to be a system of things called fagging. You have to run errands for older boys, and if you don't, you just get beaten. And there was one prefect there who had a way of giving orders without looking at people or saying please, just assuming that he was going to be obeyed. Very kind of, literally nose in the air. Go and get me this. And there was no question about obeying him. And he was a sort of template for James.
Whatever your private views may be, and in the absence of my parents, I am in charge in this house. In the situation, I expect my orders to be obeyed.
Yes, sir.
And do as you're told.
Yes, sir.
James owes his stiff upper lip very much to the fact that for a lot of the series the moustache was stuck on. And when you have a moustache stuck on there, you can't actually smile, kind of tight-ass smile.
While he was cool and distant, his cousin Georgina had the menfolk hot under their starched collars as the flirty flapper who loved to party.
Wind it up, James.
She was played by real-life good time girl Lesley-Anne Down.
Good morning, Daisy. Morning, Miss Georgina. Come and help me undress, would you?
Oh, I love every second of life more and more. I just wish this summer would go on and on forever and ever.
There wasn't a vast difference between Georgina and me. We were both young and sexually active and very, very happy people that didn't say no to very much.
Georgina wasn't the only one having a good time. After the break, what the butler saw, and quite a lot that he didn't. It may have been the straight-laced Edwardian era, but every costume drama needs a bit of bodice-ripping tension. And Upstairs Downstairs had its fair share of slap and tickle.
What? Sorry, but the Major wants you with the car. One of the things I think that was titillating from an audience's point of view, that you never quite knew what was going on from a, shall we say, a sexual situation. I mean, you could hear footsteps at night, some going up, some coming down, but you never knew in what area or in what room the footsteps finished up.
But the temperature rose as housemates went on nighttime walkabout.
I'm going to spend the night with you.
Yeah, they'll skin you alive if they catch you.
Well, they won't. It's quite safe with Rose being away.
Daisy takes a huge risk and creeps into Edward's bedroom, and they go to bed together, and it is the first time for both of them. If they got caught, and it was a huge risk, they'd have both been fired, no doubt.
No doubt you're highly experienced, what with all them country house weekends and parties and foreign maids and that.
Oh, that was just talk. You know, that was just jokes. I've never done it either, Days.
Well, the series touched on quite risque things, really, for television in the 70s.
You've got a nerve.
It was a simmering mix of masters and maids, servants and maids, and even, heaven forbid, maids and maids.
Well, one of my most interesting relationships in Upstairs Downstairs was my friendship and relationship with Sarah. The relationship looked as if it might be sexual because they slept together in a very cold attic. There were lines we said, "Oh, get in and come and give us a cuddle." And so the relationship was quite ambiguous. Say no more, Squire.
Young Master James might have had a stiff upper lip, but he could pucker up for England. Being married didn't stop his wandering eye and a long list of conquests.
I don't think he was completely faithful, James. I think he was off with a friend's wife. Not cricket at all. Not supposed to shag friends' wives, even in Edwardian times.
Give me a kiss here.
And one certainly wasn't supposed to have hanky-panky with the servants, although it didn't stop James having a scandalous affair with Sarah the parlourmaid. It was a secret that was soon to become impossible to hide.
We're up the creek, Jim. 'Cause, well, there's a little captain on the way.
What?
A little James Bellamy. Inside me.
James had done the unthinkable, crossed the social divide, and his family were not amused.
James, how could you do this to us?
Too late for tears now, Marjorie. James has involved us in what may well become a major scandal. For the sake of the family, Marjorie, this matter has got to be suppressed.
If the romance with Sarah had been allowed to go ahead, I think he would have been a different person. I think she could have sent him up, and she could have brought out maybe something approaching a sense of humour in him.
Sarah was exiled to the country, and after she lost the baby, James went back to his old ways.
He's making eyes at
This time he fell into the arms of his cousin, and for Lesley-Anne Down, the passion wasn't all scripted.
I was probably, when I joined the series, sort of in love with him like a lot of other little girls at the time. But I kind of remember sitting huddled in corners with Simon saying, oh, good grief, let's go and talk to the producers and let all the writers and let's ask them to make it so that we're sort of flirting at that party. And we sort of stirred it up.
Can't catch me! Yes, I can, and will you must be punished!
Hudson, Miss Georgina seems to have crumpled the evening paper. Better see if you can straighten it out or something.
I'll ask Rose to run an iron over it, sir.
If you would, Hudson, before my father comes in, he wouldn't... I don't want any crushed newspapers in my house. He is a shit, you know, that's what he is. But with a out-and-out shit, you can always see there's a possibility of redemption in him. And I think that was the appeal of James. You could see that maybe in the hands of the right woman, he could have made himself a better, nicer person. You know.
But try as she might, Hazel, his wife, wasn't the right woman. She was the first middle-class character to enter Eaton Place, and she was right out of her depth, leading the life of a lady.
My character was intimidated by both upstairs and down. And certainly it was well known along the corridors of Eaton Place that James was making a huge mistake.
Listen, Hazel, you are supposed to be mistress in this house. Just how the hell do you expect the servants to respect you and obey your orders if you come down here and try and cook the meals? Damn it, Hazel, you're my wife, not a cook!
Wives are often cooks where I come from.
Yes, well, they're not here and they never have been, so put that whatever it is away and go up to the morning where you belong.
James's philandering sent the public off its trolley, and Simon paid the price.
It was very unfair, because even when I wasn't at work, when I was taking the children around the supermarket, I'd get these women ramming their trolleys into me saying, I saw you treating your wife bad last night, how dare you? Oh, Hazel's a good working girl. And, excuse me, you know, it's just a part.
The most popular character of the series was a man who ruled his staff with a rod of iron, Hudson the butler.
Did you clean your shoes this morning, Edward?
Yes, Mr. Hudson.
Well, give them another rub while I go upstairs.
Rose, why have these place cards not been put around the table? I told you hours ago.
Now, Ruby, take a lesson from Mrs. Bridges on the correct way to slice a cucumber.
He was a pompous prig, but it was a part that never came easily to the late Gordon Jackson.
They used to underline his lines in different colours and was always very nervous, but when he came to deliver, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He always believed everything he said.
Come back here. Your shoes are squeaking.
But I bought them special, Mr.
They are squeaking. Away you go and soften them up. There is nothing more intolerable at a dinner party than a footman with squeaky shoes. Go on.
The moment he would transform into the character was like a instant Hudsonification moment would happen. Suddenly, his chin would go up and something slightly unpleasant held under his nose, a slight disdain, and he'd be perfectly in character.
Oh, well, I'm scarping have me lay down. Tell Ruby to fetch me up a cup of tea directly she comes in.
The show's kitchen colossus was Mrs. Bridges, played by veteran actor Angela Baddeley. She died shortly after the series finished, but on and off screen, she had always kept the household in check.
She'd been around in the business for many, many years, and she'd been around, in fact, during the period. And Andrew would often come out with, "No, darling, no, they wouldn't say that. No, that came over from America." And the producers would listen to her, and she would be right, and they would change the dialogue and write it the way Angela suggested.
Which one's cooking order and which one's serving order, Mrs. Bridges?
What did you say, Ruby?
Well, these lists. You haven't said.
Haven't you got no common sense at all? You don't start a meal with lamb. That's the cooking order. You'll never learn, not if we have 1,000 dinners.
It was a performance of transformation. She used to put the padding on, she put a great big wig on. She sort of made herself fat, and that wonderful gravelly, "Oh, Mr. Hudson," that voice was not her voice. And to suddenly see this petite, very elegant woman afterwards, you think, gosh, that was a piece of acting.
Now, what have I always told you? Come on, what is it?
A stew boiled is a stew spoiled.
A stew boiled is a stew spoiled. And this one's been boiled.
Actors came and went on the series, but when Lady Marjorie was sent down on the Titanic, Hannah Gordon was brought in to play the second Lady Bellamy, She took to the part like a duck to water.
Get me out a plain scarf, will you, Rose? My brown one will do.
I think if you were upper class, you had a much nicer time, let's face it. Everything was done for them. I think it must have been wonderful. I mean, see my bedroom on a morning when I can't decide what to wear, whereas if I'd had a lady's maid who could have set it all out for me and it's all washed and ironed, it must have been great.
You didn't even have to think for yourself. The Edwardians were the kings of etiquette, with rules on everything from table manners to tea drinking.
Usually, when you're doing a programme, the producers come and see the show and they say, fabulous, emotional content, great, just really in the character. And that's the sort of thing you want when you're acting. But our producers would come and say, Simon, I think you wouldn't wear a Windsor knot like that. You tie your tie like this. And of course you wouldn't pick up the claret glass when you were drinking this, and you wouldn't use that. So you think, oh, right. So the producers were really very, very keen on getting all the etiquette right and all the detail. And I suppose that was one of the things that made the show great.
People used to write in and say, I noticed that the jug on the table wasn't the right period. Those jugs wouldn't come in. So those things were really important.
Somebody came from the Ritz to teach us about serving, and I've always remembered that you serve on the left and take away on the right.
There used to be a rule about, at a dinner party, you had to talk to the woman on your right first or left. I can't remember which it was. Left all through the soup, and then you had to go to the right during the main course. And I remember being told this, and thinking, what a nightmare, going, I wonder, is it time for me to shift conversation now?
The Victorians could afford very beautiful bone china, which was very fine, but it was also very tough. So you could pour very hot tea into it and it wouldn't crack. So therefore you poured the tea and then you added the milk. Downstairs, where they had sort of rotten old clay things, which were actually much more breakable, you had to put the milk in first and then the tea. So you could very quickly suss somebody out by the way they drank a cup of tea.
If you'll excuse me mentioning it, madam.
Yes, Rose.
No, Lady Marjorie always used to say, no diamonds in the country.
Thank you, Rose. In short, little tiny details of that nature was the wonder of that series, because it evoked a whole world in a split second.
Where shall I put them, Mr. Hudson?
Oh, wait, one down at the far end.
This was a world where a moment's hesitation with a fish slice spelt social suicide, especially when royalty was coming for dinner.
Just think, in a few hours from now, the King of England's posterior shall occupy this very chair.
This is hardly the moment for such reflection, Rose. You've still got the flowers to do in the drawing room, the coffee tray, all the polishing in the front hall and the landing in the drawing room.
I remember as Rose and as Jean being outraged because a maid was never allowed to serve the king. It was just not done. So I'd done all this work and I wasn't going to see him. And I thought, this is so unfair. So I think I had some lines in it about, how comes this then? I've done all the work and I'm not bleeding allowed to serve him.
I still don't understand why I can't wait at table, same as I always do.
His Majesty objects to female servants waiting at the table. You will have ample opportunity of witnessing the dinner from behind the screen, where you will remain out of sight, collecting the empty plates and placing them quietly in the service.
Yes, Mr. Hudson.
When the King came to dinner, which is a programme everybody loved, Miss Bridges and Ruby, of course, would have been at it all day, would have probably both got up an hour earlier to prepare this wonderful spread. We decided, unknown to makeup, that just before the cameras were about to roll, we pulled our hair out. I pulled all my hair out of my cap. We threw eggs at each other, flour, messed ourselves up, and the makeup were running towards us. The camera was rolling, and of course it was too late. We filmed looking as we would look on a day like that in the kitchen.
Here he is now. Open the door, Hudson.
By the mid-1970s, the Bellamys and their staff had built an empire royalty would have been proud of. Find out next what happened when Upstairs Downstairs conquered the world.
Ruby,
Oui, Madame Bridges.
une tasse de thé pour Monsieur Hudson ou je vais te scalper.
By the mid-1970s, the Bellamys and their staff had an empire Victoria would have been proud of.
¿Hay alguien enfermo?
El hermano del señor va a pasar aquí el fin de semana.
Like Britannia, the series ruled the airwaves in 24 countries, attracting audiences of over 70 million.
Ist Milady zu der Dinnerparty aus Schottland wieder zurück, Milord?
Ja, ich erwarte Sie am Montag zurück, Hudson. Sie wird da sein.
Na also, dann brauchst du uns doch nicht.
Aber natürlich brauche ich euch.
It was huge, even over the pond. The Yanks loved it, even if they did think it was a documentary.
Of course, the Americans absolutely adored Upstairs, Downstairs, the whole thing of the class system, servants, and I think they imagined life was still like that in England.
People say, well, this is the way it's like. This is what it's like in England. Let's go to England. See the Queen, you know. Might see Mrs. Bridges, you know. It was one of those. And they believed that that's what you were like.
Oh, Mrs. Bridges, just look at this sheet. Captain James must have put his foot right through it. I have to put on a new one.
I was stopped in the street once outside Harrods by a woman who said, "Oh, you're Jean Marsh, aren't you? You play Rose." I said, "Yes." She said, "I just absolutely know that eventually we're going to find that you're really the illegitimate daughter of an earl." And I said, "Why?" She, "Well, look at you." She said, you're sort of quite tall and you're slim and you've got very good cheekbones. Well, I went apeshit. I said, "What makes you think that, you know, working class girls don't have cheekbones? They're not the prerogative of the aristocracy."
For a certain kind of upstairs, downstairs enthusiast, though, the common touch was just what they wanted from Rose.
I got lots of erotic fan mail. All the upstairs girls were so beautiful and so desirable, but I got the most erotic stuff because gentlemen, or not gentlemen, just men, wanted to do things to me in my uniform. And it was very funny because I thought, it's all so uncomfortable, their suggestions. They never wanted to take me to bed. They wanted me in the kitchen, on the kitchen table, putting coal on the fire. I thought, I don't think this is very tempting.
Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes.
In the real world, though, it was the height of the flared, flamboyant 70s, and the cast were loving their newfound fame.
Changes.
Well, it was great because I'd just come to London from drama school. I was earning money, rehearsing on the King's Road. All the shops were in the heyday of the sort of 70s fashion.
It was a torture having to have short hair in those days. It was really, everyone thought you'd been in prison, you know.
My life was very un-Rose-like. I wore fabulous clothes, you know. And it was the days when you didn't wear a bra. Can you imagine Rose not wearing a bra?
Lesley-Anne was letting it all hang out. On and off screen, she was having a ball.
When we were doing it, it was a different time, obviously. There didn't seem to be very much wrong with going across to the wine bar every single lunchtime and downing a few glasses of wine. I will speak for myself, I won't bring anybody else into my little quagmire of badness. I certainly was very much a party animal.
But for Ruby, finding life imitating art was not so much fun.
I was of an age, I was young, and, you know, I loved going out to parties, flirting and whatever. And it became difficult because Ruby was described as being the ugly duckling of television, and I had to wear these drab outfits and no makeup on and really, you know, horrible hairstyle. And it did start to affect me a bit as a woman. And I found there was a period I just didn't go out, I stayed in. I remember suddenly when Upstairs started to be shown, and suddenly everybody started to recognise me, and it became quite frightening. And I was still at a period where I was still being a bit shy and a bit silly and working class, and I got really scared of it all. And I used to hide in shops, and people used to say, You're Ruby, aren't you? And I go, "Oh, no, not me. No, I look like her, but no, I'm not Ruby."
By now, the world knew that Upstairs, Downstairs was a class act. But did they know just how much of a class act it was, on and off camera?
You were the upstairs people, and they were the downstairs people.
Oh, Frederick.
Good evening, Miss Georgina.
Look, the cocktail thing's up good. I think I'll make, sidecar.
the friends that you had were mostly for me the upstairs people and mostly for them the downstairs people. There wasn't a lot of interaction.
Hanson.
Thank you, Rose.
Good night, Rose. Hanson.
Good night, sir. Good night, miss.
Good night.
The interesting thing was when we were going through the successful period and going to lots of swank affairs, was that we'd all arrived together, but Lady Marjorie and Dad and Nicola Paget and I would sort of, someone would come and take our coat and give us some champagne, and Angela Badley and Gordon Jackson, who were sort of stars of the show, would sort of be left hanging their own coats up a little bit. And that was his slight nose out of joint there. And poor Ruby, of course, would always be left sort of vaguely being asked to help wash up, I suppose.
Come on, Ruby. There, Dad. The master and her ladyship have come to join in the fun.
I've got to get these done. We carried our own props around, and the upstairs people were helped. And it would be, when the tea came round, Mr. Lantern, Miss Gurney, would you like your tea? And whatever. And, hey, Jenny, there's teas over there. Go and help yourself. Go and get one. Get one for me as well.
Thank you, Hudson. Darling Gordon Jackson, God rest his soul, would always walk in with the tea and offer you a sandwich. Not filming, just, would you like a sandwich? And do a little bend. And we just say, oh, thanks. Nibble away, not even thinking. It's only in retrospect now that I realise just how much we all took on our characters.
I don't like those, they're too fussy. Bring me the others. Very good.
And if you were the lady of the house, it was easy to start acting to the manner born.
Lady Marjorie always got a corner dressing room. You had, oh, it's so awful, a free box of Kleenex. And I never got this. I always had a dingy dressing room.
No, don't like those either. Let's try the filigree necklace.
So one day they gave me my dressing room key. I said, nope, I don't want this. I'll tell you, I want a corner one with a window. I said, just because she's playing a lady doesn't mean to say she is a lady. And even if she is, I want that dressing room sometimes. I got it.
Wing collars or whalebones, cravats or cummerbunds, the costumes were crucial.
They were absolutely rigid, the costumiers, rightly so, about the underwear. Nowadays, it's what do you want to wear underneath? It doesn't matter, you want to wear a thong, okay, fine. But then they were so rigid, you had to have the right camisole, the right this, the right that. There were three layers of petticoats. It was very uncomfortable.
Sheila Jackson worked on all 5 series of Upstairs Downstairs, running up thousands of outfits from breeches to ball gowns and earning herself a reputation as one of the best costumiers in the industry. For her, no detail was too small.
These are called washing buttons. They're cotton buttons, you see. And we use them on all the maids' aprons and their dresses and things because, you see, all these clothes were mangled. They were washed with a dubber and they were mangled. And if you had ordinary buttons, they would all have broken. And so I was very, very particular about, and everybody laughed about Sheila and her washing buttons.
Hudson sent word up to Rose to say that you were waiting for me. Is that so?
Taxi waiting, Virginia, and it's 10 minutes to 8.
The costume side of it was fantastic. The accuracy there, not just the colours and the clothes and the fabrics, but I remember Sheila saying, we've actually used period patterns for your dresses because the darts were in a different place or at a different angle in those days.
Oh, those collars. At the end of the day, this, like cardboard, every time you turned your neck, great 2-inch collar in your neck. And your stiff-fronted shirt. And certainly the uniform holds you in a certain way that makes you feel the characters.
By Series 4, the cast were dressed for battle. Its award-winning coverage of the war was trailblazing. For the first time, a TV programme captured the emotions of both those who fought and those who stayed at home.
Oh, well, if the old engine runs out of steam, perhaps we won't get as far as Folkestone, eh, Charlie? Cheer up, Dave. You never know.
There's a scene when I see Edward off to the war on the day they get married, and there's a very sort of weepy scene at the railway station.
Oh, Davey, I've done well. The train will be going soon. Come on, Davey, cheer up.
Oh, it was a fantastic scene, but very emotionally draining, and I just went home and had to go straight to bed. I couldn't do anything afterwards at all.
After the armistice, the suffering continued for the homecoming James, as it had for millions of real combatants.
Something monstrous, evil, mad about it all. And it's all bolstered up by people here not knowing what it's really like some vast confidence trick. I did get quite a lot of mail from war veterans saying that's how it was and that's how it felt. It was, and that's a very good form of acting when you seem to get people recognise something in what you're doing as the truth.
The stress of fighting and financial ruin led James to end his life. And for Simon, it was a merciful release.
I thought, he's gone. I'm free of him. It was like being exorcised. And I was obviously sad that the cheques weren't going to come through anymore. But I was very, very glad to see the back of him. I felt a great, great sense of relief. I thought, oh, poor old troubled old James, finished at last.
Soon after, devoted viewers were in mourning again. In December 1975, the door closed for the last time on 165 Eaton Place.
Ruby, don't interfere.
The guest was dining at the house tonight with Mercy. Thursday morning, actually, met in Geneva. They're friends of the Talbots, Sheila.
It was very sad. She stands, just in the hall, looks round, and it's like leaving a house. It's like losing somebody. And it was very sad. Oh, I cried.
Well, when I did it, it was very emotional anyway. I turned and looked back at the house, and of course I was looking at something that had meant so much to me. I knew that however much you say you will, those friendships were gone, that I was looking at the past. My tears were real. Absolutely real.
So it was goodbye, but wipe that tear, baby dear, from your eye. Find out next what happens when Upstairs and Down are reunited for the first time in a quarter of a century.
Note, he is serving me.
It's been over 25 years since the grand walls of Eaton Place echoed to the sound of the Bellamy clan. Today, we're opening the door on a very special reunion.
Oh, good grief.
Changed a bit. Well, the years have been jolly kind to you, Marsh.
Yes, they
have. You?
Oh,
you
too,
Sam.
God, I'd forgotten how charming you are. Quick, let me give you a big hug. Oh, so charming. Listen, where's everybody else?
I don't know. What, the staff? We don't want to worry about them.
And finally, the upper crust are getting a taste of life down below.
I think it might have been more fun to be downstairs. They all seem to be, watching all the downstairs scenes, they all seem to be having more fun down in the kitchen.
Can I
call this for you, sir?
Note, he is serving me.
I think if you've never had to lift a finger in your life, never got your hands dirty or something, you therefore cannot be expected to have any inkling whatsoever about what it feels like to get up at 4 in the morning and light fires.
Hey, excuse me. I think you and I should be at the head of the table. You're sitting there like a...
Sorry, sir.
Ruby would look at the upstairs people and think, oh yes, I'd love to wear a frock like that and live in a big house like that. And maybe a little bit of me thought, yeah, I'd love to really dress up and go to town with makeup and beautiful frocks and whatever. Of course I did.
Oh, look at Ruby being good. You're doing the work. Yeah.
Like that.
Jenny, have you seen these?
No, you can tell. Look.
I sometimes wish I had been born, like, say, middle class, because it takes a lot of time to learn how to pass as a middle class or an upper class person. And most of my adult life has spent being amongst richer, better born and well-educated people. And I didn't even know what doors to knock on. You know, I didn't quite know the entree. And now, of course, I don't care. I don't give a toss, you know. I think I no longer feel that I have to fit in. If I get things wrong, tough shit, you know.
A toast to all of us here and to all absent friends, to upstairs, downstairs. Cheers!
Upstairs, downstairs. As the champagne corks pop again in one of TV's most des reses, what happened to the residents when the series ended? Was it upstairs or downstairs? Simon Williams has carried on living the charmed life of the upstairs gent. On stage and on screen, he's the country's most talented toff.
In any other profession, you call it specialising. I specialise, I suppose, in playing people with plummy vowels.
James Bellamy might be laid to rest, but Simon is still living in the good old days in London's West End. But to prove he's no period piece, watch out for his next role.
I've written a play called Nobody's Perfect, which is a huge success all around Europe. It's about a man who gets found out writing romantic fiction under a woman's pseudonym. So inevitably it has a moment when he has to dress up as a woman. So if anyone wants to see James Bellamy 30 years on in a frock, they can catch that later on.
Jean Marsh won an Emmy Award for her portrayal of Rose, and she's gathered awards and critical acclaim in her second career as a novelist, but she's still living life in the past lane.
I always seem to write about the past. My last book, one of my best friends said to me, "Is that set in the past again?" And I said, no, it's not set in the past. It's set in the 50s and 60s. I thought, of course it's the past.
At the country house of Sir William McCordle, the guests are wealthy.
If I wanted coffee, I'd have rung for it.
He thinks he's God Almighty. They all do.
The servants are loyal.
Meg Wynn Owen went from the lady of the house to the lady's maid in her recent appearance in Robert Altman's Oscar-winning Gosford Park.
My character is Lewis, lady's maid to Kristen Scott Thomas. From one circle playing the lady of the house to another circle playing the lady's maid is, quite charming.
Jackie Tong has carried on earning a living as an actor and has come a long way since her first role playing Daisy.
It's 30 years ago next year that I started, so a lot has happened. I've developed my career, matured, I suppose, hopefully. Although sometimes you still feel like a kid, you know.
Lesley-Anne Down took her cue from her alter ego, the flighty Georgina. After the series ended, she quit England for the Hollywood Hills, a film career and a full-time job as party girl.
All of my behaviour and the things that I put into my body was because I was not at all equipped for this industry.
Older and wiser, nearly 50 and married for the third time, it seems the wild child is finally tamed. And she likes it like that.
My life is my child and my husband, because there was never a man in my life before John that I was ever faithful to. Having reached virtually the ripe old age of half a century old, I don't quite have the energy for that anymore. It's more like, it's 9:30, I think I'm going to go to bed now, darling.
Hannah Gordon has continued to brush with fame, most recently presenting on daytime TV, and she's still playing the lady giving orders.
All right, everybody. You have 4 hours to complete your watercolour challenge, starting from now.
I've actually been presenting a series every summer, and this year is the first year that we're not doing it. And I suddenly realised that I hadn't seen the summer from the point of view of enjoying it for 5 years. So this year I'm really going for it.
Not everyone managed to work their way up, though.
Not so long ago, anybody who was anybody had servants. But now, just about everyone can have a housemaid below stairs.
Despite various bit parts on TV and appearing in panto, Jenny Tomasin is waiting for her second big break.
Doing a bit of writing, which is keeping my soul alive, looking for work, writing letters, my agent's putting me up. It's a little bit of a... how do I describe it? Something jobbing actors go through, because that's really what I am. It's a bit of a lean period. There's a lot happening in my life which isn't very good. And I'm having to deal with it. The bailiffs are practically knocking on the door. But show business is so strange. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
For Gareth Hunt, it was out of the frying pan into the firing line. He went from Fred the Footman to Gorgeous Gambit in another hit 70s series.
It was through Upstairs, Downstairs, and I got the part of Mike Gambit in The Avengers. No upstairs, downstairs, no Mike Gambit, no sat here talking. So I've got a lot to thank Upstairs, Downstairs for.
But his most memorable moment was still to come. Anyone for coffee?
How could I be sat here without mentioning that? 10 years of that.
Nothing beats that special Nescafe blend and roast. To get you started in the morning.
And I actually got a gold disc at the end of it. It's like getting a watch.
The nation's favourite cook, Angela Baddeley, got a CBE for her portrayal of Mrs. Bridges. In 1976, she died of pneumonia, aged 71. And fellow servant Gordon Jackson stunned viewers in his next incarnation as professional hardman Cowley.
Bodie. So help me, Bodie, if you finish that neck lock, I'll shoot you dead.
Honoured with an OBE for his services to acting, he died of cancer in January 1990, aged 66. And so, as the cast finally take their leave of Eaton Place, how have they enjoyed their journey?
I think the legacy, probably for most of us of Upstairs Downstairs, was that it put us on the acting map. I mean, it was, everybody knew what it was, everybody knew what we looked like.
Shall we go? Off we go then.
That's it. Bye.
30 years since I've done Upstairs, Downstairs. I've been on many journeys since then, some good, some bad, some up, some down. But it's been a journey.
Yeah, okay. It's too long a journey, 30 years to detail it, but I think mostly I've had a rather happy time.
They really were. They were the best.
Here I am 30 years later and it's still being talked about and people still watch it, buy the videos, and it has a kudos and it has a staying power.
We had a plain scarf. What used to say, no diamonds in the country.
Thank you, Rose.
Me, Robert. The old house to keep clean, all the linen and now the bloody silk.
I wish the summer would go on and on forever and ever.
It may not be 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it is Upstairs, Downstairs, and it's never going to go away. And I am incredibly proud and happy that I was part of it.
All's